Hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. My name is Brian Hussar, and I talk about the Beatles, music, movies, and physical media. It's been a while, and a lot of my longtime subscribers know exactly why, but I'm back. Well, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about this one. 1978's London Town by Wings, Paul McCartney and Wings. Back cover. I've loved this cover. I think the music on this album reflects this cover, actually, with side one being kind of cold and rainy feeling. By the way, Denny Lane was added to this. There's an unedited photo of him on Google. Go ahead and look it up. He's actually holding a joint in his hand. And this is the back cover. This comes with the actual poster that came with the album. One of the things about Paul is that he always believed in value for your money. You get posters, you get booklets, gatefold sleeves, custom labels, anything. Here's one side of the poster that you could display. And here is another side of the poster that you could display. You could put that, and you could put this on your wall or wherever. I first got a copy of this around the time it came out from my Aunt Helen, after it was a gift from having my tonsils taken out. She got me this and the Yellow Submarine album. Thank you, Aunt Helen. So I have a warm spot for London Town. Always did, always will. Now, London Town came out hot on the heels of that 1976-77 blitzkrieg that Paul McCartney and Wings did, actually beginning in 75, which was the first part of the tour in England and Europe. And then 76, they took a break, did Wings at the Speed of Sound, and then they did the big American tour, Wings Over America. I think they continued back on to England and did Wembley, and I think Italy as well after that. But big tour, 75, 76, and then in 77 they released the big triple live album, Wings Over America. 78 was going to be the same practice initially. They were going to do an album and then go on a big tour again. At least that's what the plan was. During the making of London Town, Steve Marriott, formerly of the Small Faces and then Humble Pie, stole Jimmy McCulloch from the band, and then eventually Jim McCulloch overdosed. Don't know how long after the split happened when he finally overdosed. And then Joe English, the drummer, just got homesick for America. He's on a majority of the tracks. I know his drumming style, and Jimmy is on a number of tracks as well. You could hear his guitar playing, his lead playing on the title track, Cafe on the Left Bank, Don't Let It Bring You Down. So he's on the album. Towards the end, they were back down to a trio again of Paul, Denny, and Linda. Right after the album came out, Steve Holley joined, and then eventually Lawrence Joubert joined, which would make up the final lineup of Wings. And the initial idea for the album, Paul always liked to record in exotic places during his post-Beatles period. And he was always, we know the whole Lagos story of Band on the Run, and then he started initial sessions for Venus and Mars in Nashville, and then eventually New Orleans for that album. And sometimes the vibe would seep into the tracks. On this one, they decided to have a bunch of boats off the Virgin Islands, I believe. And they would have one boat that was a recording studio and other boats for living. Very extravagant. And they were all kind of linked together. So initially, a lot of the sessions happened on one of the boats. Then they did some overdubs on those back at Abbey Road, and then they did further sessions at Abbey Road and I think Air Studios as well. I love this album. It's got a feel to it. And we could talk about how, and I've heard people say, well, London Town is not a great opening track. Maybe he should have began the album with Cafe on the Left Bank. But Ever since the band on Music from Big Pink opened their album deliberately with Tears of Rage, this slow funeral-like dirge, which they did deliberately as a rebellion against these fast opening tracks on albums, which is why they did it. Which is probably why George began All Things Must Pass with I'd Have You Anytime. Paul does it here. And I think the title track sort of sets up it's a very low-key album. It sets up the sort of low-key mood of the album. This album, for some reason, does not scream event the way Band on the Run did, the way Venus and Mars did, the way Wings at the Speed of Sound did. It's a rather low-key album. But to me, this album is best heard in the fall. Always for me, this album works in the fall. Now that I live in Arizona, my fall happens sometime in November and December. But back when I lived in Chicago, when the leaves are changing color, if you live in Chicago, you live in New York, anywhere on the East Coast, the leaves are changing color, got those overcast days, those damp days. This album works very well. And the opening track leads you into that mood. Then it picks up with Cafe on the Left Bank. Then you get a nice acoustic ballad with I'm Carrying, which I think was inspired by Linda's pregnancy to Paul's son. And then Backwards Traveler, a good track, and then Cufflink, which is a linking track, does tend to go on a bit too long to be a linking track. But I like the groove. I like the feel of it. To me, the unsung hero of this album is and always will be Denny Laine. Denny Laine came into his own on this album finally. He finally realized his place with Paul McCartney and did, in my opinion, two of the best songs on this album. Children, Children, and Deliver Your Children. Both of them are great tracks. Both of them have this nice folk influence. Deliver Your Children is just a haunting melody, and to me, a haunting lyric as well. Paul brings it up a bit on side one with Girlfriend, which was written for Michael Jackson and eventually given to Michael Jackson for Off the Wall. Michael Jackson's version of it is pretty similar, except the midsection, which goes on this album with the guitar solo. I've Had Enough, a good rocker. With a little luck, I love it, and some people don't like the long album version of it. I love the long album version of it with the interlude and the keyboard solo. I love it. Famous Groupies is one of Paul's novelty tunes. I'm still trying to figure out what type of groupies he's talking about, other than the fact that he realizes he could rhyme groupies with two P's and Snoopies. So it's a fun tune, not one of his best, but overall, in the scheme of things, it works. Deliver Your Children, I've talked about. Name and Address, Paul wrote for Elvis, he said, and he does a great Elvis impression on that. Don't Let It Bring You Down, one of Paul's haunting ballads with beautiful phased guitars, a beautiful lead by Jimmy McCulloch. And then you end the album with The Day in the Life of the album. Morris Moose and The Grey Goose. You could kind of say an attempt to combine sea shanties with disco, but it works in the operatic kind of way. It's about a guy on a ship and the ship is sinking or calling for some sort of help. And to me, I like the sound effects happening in there of the radio in the background and the Morse code. I like the experimental nature of the track, and back then, as I've often said, as you've heard me say before, Paul learned the lessons of Sgt. Pepper and carried it to his solo career, specifically in Wings, the post-Beatles period, of taking a series of tracks that may or may not have a theme to them and making it seem like they all hang together. He did that with Sgt. Pepper. The Beatles did that with the White Album. They did it with Abbey Road. Paul kept going with that in his post-Beatles career. And I think that's an art. It's a great art of album sequencing. He had that art down to a T. I like the sequencing of this album. I can't fault it. I know I've heard some people fault it. I can't, because I think it sets a mood. And side-wise, back when we're talking side 1 and side 2, kids, side 1 really reflects the sort of fall, rainy vibe, that cold vibe that this front cover has. And the backside does kind of reflect this, sunny vibe here. To me, it's a great album. I associate it with a very good period, or a younger period of my life, after I had my tonsils taken out, and how much I played this album. So, London Town by Wings, Paul McCartney and Wings, I think is a great album. I'm a big fan of it. It's never weakened for me over the years. I would love for him to get this and Back to the Egg in the archive collection soon. I would love to hear the bonus stuff. I would love to hear the stories of the boat and the adventure that they had during the making of the album. So, Paul McCartney and Wings, London Town, I love it. I think it's a great album. That is my take. Thank you so much. Please, if you like my channel, hit subscribe and hit the bell notification. Spread the word about my channel. I have some new subscribers, so thank you all who are subscribing to me. I don't have a Patreon account. I don't know if I should do that. I'm debating on it to spread the word. But, I'm glad I have you guys with me, and spread the word about my channel. And thank you all so much. Be well and be safe. And until next time.